everyone. Welcome back to another episode of From Generation to Generation. I'm your host, Mira Mikhail, and I'm here today with Bishoy Soriel. And we are talking about the 3rd through 11th popes of the Coptic Church, who are Pope Avilius to Pope Julian. So Bishoy, there is very little that's documented in this era about the popes of the Coptic Church.
The historians during this time, because it was the 1st and 2nd centuries of the papacy of St. Mark, it's a new movement that's alive with the Christians and the martyrs that were active during this period. So to document what each pope had done during this period, it was very limited. But we do refer to in the references containing the history of the bishops of Alexandria to the historian Eusebius of Caesarea. Although we have differences with Eusebius as the Coptic Church, we do seek out his testimony of the history documented from the time of our Lord Jesus Christ up until the mid-4th century. But nonetheless, you're right. From the popes of St. Mark, from the 3rd patriarch up until the 11th, we have limited material compared to other patriarchs that we're able to speak about. For example, now, just to be able to present, what went on briefly for each of these patriarchs, we'll start with the 3rd pope. We know his name is Pope Avilius, and at this time you have the firsts. These are all the firsts. Unlike, right now in the 21st century, we have Pope Tewodros II. Prior to him, we had Pope Shenouda III. So these are the firsts that were introduced to us as the fathers of the church, with the firsts of these names. And I don't think they're repeated. These couple of names we'll go through. Not a lot of them were repeated, with the exception of St. Mark, I think Enienus, but we'll see that these were popes that ended up carrying on the mission of spreading the name of Christ and maintaining the spirit of the church in Egypt or Alexandria. So the 3rd pope, we know his name is Avilius, Pope Avilius I. He's the 3rd patriarch of the See of St. Mark. He shepherded the flock of Christ in Alexandria for approximately 12 years. And this was still before the 1st century was even completed. Additionally, he not only shepherded them in Egypt exclusively, but we start seeing his flock extending out to the 5 western cities of Libya. And this is presently known as the 5 western cities of Libya pertaining to the Diocese of Beheira, which we now know to be part of the Diocese of His Eminence Metropolitan, currently Bohemios, who was the locum tenens during the period between His Holiness Pope Shenouda III and His Holiness Pope Tewodros II. And we know that his papacy ended when he passed in 95 AD.
So picking up from there, from 95 AD, we have the 4th patriarch of the Coptic Church, who is Pope Serdo. And he only sat in office for 11 years, which was fairly short for the time. So from 95 AD to 106 AD. And that is really the first time that we see the idea of casting lots for the Pope. So this is the first time that casting lots was used to elect the patriarch in the See of Alexandria. And that was towards the end of the 1st century to the beginning of the 2nd century, so very early on.
And after that, we also now learn of Pope Primus. He is the 5th patriarch, and he shepherded the flock of Christ in Alexandria for 16 years, as presented to us in the books of history pertaining to Eusebius. We learned of him that he was pious and he was a chaste layman before he was selected to become the patriarch. We also learned one of the major events of this time to be of the Jewish massacre that occurred in Alexandria, where the Romans ended up massacring or annihilating a good portion of the Jewish population in the city of Alexandria during this time. This particular instance is different than the persecution of Christians during this time, which seemed to be more personal to the papacy of Pope Primus rather than a national persecution of the Christian church. And then because we don't have as much information, we understand that he passed in the Lord, and he was buried near St. Mark's relics in the church of El Bucalia, as we currently see from time to time this location repeating itself as being that hub of where the popes or the patriarchs of the time had stayed and saw that as being their archdiocese.
Mm-hmm. So then that brings us to the 6th patriarch of Alexandria, who is Pope Justus. Pope Justus only reigned for 8 years, so again, very short span of time, from 122 to 130 AD. And again, not very much is documented about Pope Justus. All we know is that he held office for 8 years, and he, again, like his predecessors, was buried near the relics of St. Mark in the Church of Bucalis.
And when he passed, we learned of the 7th patriarch, Pope Eumenius. Pope Eumenius was a pope from the year 130 to 142, and he shepherded his flock for 13 years. Not much is written of his papacy during this time. We learned that he died during the reign of Emperor Antoninus Pius, and like the previous popes, he also was laid to rest near the remains of St. Mark in the Bucalia.
Okay, so after Pope Eumenius passed, then we have our 8th patriarch of Alexandria, who is Pope Marcianus, and he held office for a decade, so from 143 to 154 AD. He also died, like Pope Eumenius, during the reign of Emperor Antoninus Pius. And again, same thing, we see this again, not much documented or written about his seat on the papal throne. But we do know that he was laid to rest near the relics of St. Mark in the Church of Bucalis.
After which we learn of the papacy of Pope Siladion, and he is the 9th patriarch. Pope Siladion had shepherded his flock for approximately 10 years, and he died during the reign of a very famous emperor due to his philosophy and books written and letters written pertaining to wisdom or stoicism. He goes by the name of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, which wasn't very compassionate with Christians at the time. So nonetheless, he was just like the rest up until this moment in history, up until, of course, Diocletian, which is a very famous persecuting emperor. But with Marcus Aurelius, he did persecute Christians at this time. And with Pope Siladion, he laid to rest, from what we read in the books of history books, that he was laid to rest, and like the previous popes, he was laid to rest near St. Mark's relics in the Church of Bucalis.
So also during the reign of Pope Marcus Aurelius, we have Pope Agrippinus, who reigned for 13 years from the years 167 to 180 AD. So again, during a very violent time for the Coptic Church, and once again, he is laid to rest near the relics of St. Mark in the Church of Bucalis.
And after the passing of Pope Agrippinus, we start now seeing more material for the popes of Alexandria. Mm-hmm. And this brings us to the 11th Pope of the See of Alexandria, which is more popular because of the Pope he ended up presenting us to, that had presented some significant changes in history to the Church of Alexandria in his time, and he's known as Pope Demetrius, which we'll have a lot to speak about, but nonetheless, this Pope's 11th Pope's name is Pope Julian, is very well famously known for being the Pope of which the Julian Calendar is named after, presented to us by Pope Demetrius, but nonetheless, Pope Julian was the 11th Pope. He shortly shepherded his flock for 9 years, and he was known for composing homilies or sermons on the saints up until the point of his passing, which was the late 2nd century. He passed year 189. He was known for ordaining priests, and he ordained them in every place and not just Alexandria, which is important and significant to the spreading of the name of Christ, not just in Alexandria, but the surrounding regions. Pope Julian had in this time lived throughout the reign of one by the name of Emperor Commodius, and passed during one of the name of Emperor Severus. And he was a righteous father, and we can learn more about how he introduced the following pope in the upcoming episode.
Yes, and I do love that story of how Pope Julian introduced us to Pope Demetrius. We want to thank you all so much for joining us for our 4th episode of From Generation to Generation, and we hope to see you next time.